Archie, I'm reading this annuity contract and I'm thinking maybe it wasn't such a great idea. What do you think?
Can I see that? Oh, let's charge right into this. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to Last Paycheck. We're your hosts, Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, we're going to follow up on our last episode where we talked about annuities. So last time we kind of covered what annuities are, how they work, and how to figure out if they're going to be the right product for you. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about what do you do if you're in an annuity and it turns out it maybe wasn't the right product for you. So there's a lot to consider. We want to start with maybe looking at, why people buy them and then why they might regret that decision. So, Rob, what are some of the things that pull people in that they later regret?
Well, Archie, I always like to, bring real life situations that are happening in the practice. And so I brought one of those. This is from a couple of years ago, but we had a new client that came in, and they, as is usually the case when we begin a financial planning engagement, they come in and they bring a big box of things that, tax returns, wills, trusts, investment statements. If they had a financial plan before, a copy of the financial plan, all of these things. And in this big stack of paper, there was an annuity statement. And so I asked the client, I said, so tell me about this. And she said, oh, yeah, that. Turns out it was a fixed indexed annuity. Not that that really matters, but she wasn't happy with it. And the reason she wasn't happy with it is because she felt trapped in the product. She had put $200,000 in this annuity, and it had a very low interest rate. It wasn't terrible 2 years ago, but it's terrible now as interest rates have risen. So she was stuck in a 3% interest rate, and some sort of a market. It was connected to the market in some way, the S&P 500, but over a rolling 10-year period or something. Essentially, she was stuck with 3%. And the reason that she was stuck is that she still has it. It has a 13-year surrender charge. So for those of you who aren't familiar with these types of annuities, these are annuities that are sold. They pay an agent a commission. Everyone deserves to get paid for the work that they do. And whether it's a commission or a fee, I'm not gonna sit here like a judge and expand on that. But essentially, this particular annuity contract with a 13-year surrender charge, declining surrender charge, started with a 10% surrender penalty and goes to zero over 13 years. So I've never seen one so punitive as that, frankly. And it's complicated by the fact that as soon as this agent sold the annuity to this person, he was nowhere to be found, right? So these annuities pay the commissions usually upfront. Not always, but usually the lion's share of the commission is paid upfront. The surrender charge is the way that the insurance company gets reimbursed for paying the commission. So they upfront the commission to the agent, but then they charge a very high internal expense ratio called a mortality and expense charge to the client. After a certain period of time, they've recouped the cost of that commission They don't always reduce the M&E charge, the mortality and expense charge. But if you cancel it before that surrender period is up, they're going to take that commission from you.
Right. That's part of what people end up feeling regret about, right? Is that it's like you said, that feeling of being trapped. That's, in my experience, most of the people who come to me and say, I'm in this annuity, I don't want to be in it anymore, it's because they feel trapped. And it's either trapped by the surrender charge. Some annuities have sort of an effectively a surrender charge that never goes away. You've got a cash value that's always less than the accumulation value, and it never catches up. So you feel like even if you do leave 20, 30 years later, you're still not getting what you thought you were. Usually when someone gets pulled into one of these, and maybe for the wrong reasons, it's for some kind of guarantee, right? Some kind of, hey, well, if they mention the surrender charge, yes, there's a surrender charge, but you get downside protection, you get income guarantees, you get withdrawal guarantees or death benefit guarantees. And that draws people in, but then the realization sometimes sets in that, well, you can't do anything about it. You can't get out of it. But there are options available. And that's what we want to talk to you about today is what can you do if you've been pulled into one of these? You've got really high fees that you don't like. You've got the surrender charge.
Well, and to be clear, I mean, all of these details are outlined in the prospectus.
Yeah.
Right. But I talk to people all the time and ask them if they read the prospectus, and without exception, over 31 years in practice, they all say no.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a mistake. And we should also say, Archie, that not all annuities are the same.
Right.
Right. So, but understanding what you're buying before you buy it is really important. It's such a problem, actually, that the regulators have put in place what's called a free look period. So if you buy an annuity and you get buyer's remorse, as long as it's within
Typically
the
30
free look period, which is typically 30 days, then you can return it and get your money back as if nothing happened. But beyond that, you're sort of stuck with it.
Right.
And even going to the insurance company, lawyer in hand, doesn't necessarily work. In fact, it normally doesn't because, yes, it's true, you were given a prospectus most likely, so you should have been informed. So again, here's a perfect example of why having a fiduciary advisor is important.
Right, because, with a fiduciary advisor, a fiduciary has the duty to put your interests ahead of their own, right? And they can't sell you if they have two solutions for you. One solution, they get paid a big commission. The other solution, they don't. They have to select the one that's best for you, completely agnostic to anything that they will gain or lose.
At the very least, they have to fully disclose, anytime there's any sort of conflict of interest in a transaction in a way that you can understand.
Right. That's why that's such an important aspect, especially because it's like you said, Rob, sometimes you hear stories of someone is sold an annuity. The person who sold it was very friendly, very gregarious, great salesperson, made you feel really cared for, and then they were gone, never to be seen again, very difficult to get a hold of, and you're stuck waiting on hold, talking to someone who doesn't, understand the product as well as they ought to, and you hear nightmare stories like that all the time.
Let's say you have an annuity, and you want to get out of it, and maybe you're beyond the surrender charge. What are your options?
So if you're beyond the surrender charge, you can surrender the contract without having that charge and withdraw the funds, right? All of the cash that you've put in plus the earnings. However, you're still going to have a tax problem if you do that potentially.
If it's in a non-qualified or non-IRA type registration.
Right. So this is where we should maybe touch on the different tax treatment of annuities. You can have a non-qualified annuity, which is it's a commercial annuity. You bought it and it's not in an IRA. You can also have an annuity that's qualified. It's in an IRA or a retirement plan. With the non-qualified, you can withdraw, let's say you surrender the contract and you withdraw the funds. The amount that you contributed originally is not going to be taxed because it was after tax to begin with. You'd already paid taxes on that money. But the earnings that came from the annuity, say a fixed annuity earning 3%, that 3% interest that you've earned every year, that will be taxed as ordinary income, so at your marginal tax bracket. On the flip side, the qualified annuity, all of it is taxed as ordinary income. It's like taking an IRA withdrawal.
But you could roll that into another IRA account, right?
Right.
So something I think we should touch on is if you have an annuity and it has a long surrender period, most of these annuities do allow for surrender-free distributions or withdrawals of up to 10% of the contract's value in any given year. So let's say you buy an annuity, you still own it after the free look period, and it's got a 10-year contingent deferred sales charge or surrender charge. You could, over that 10-year period, do a 10% distribution each year, move most of the money out within that period of time, and not be subject to the surrender charge.
Right.
In the later years also, if you get to the later years and you've got a surrender charge and the one right here, this one that has the 13-year surrender charge, in year 10, the surrender charge is 2.5%, year 11, 1.5%, year 12, 0.5%. If you find a non-commission or some other annuity that's attractive and attractively priced, you may be able to make a case for suffering the surrender charge, because if you're able to get a higher rate in the new product or just in an investment or savings account, which might be the case right now with interest rates where they are having risen over the last year or so, maybe you don't have to wait until the whole surrender period has expired. So another thought there.
Right. It's important to keep in mind, even with those penalty-free withdrawals, it's typically something like 10% of the contract value. You still may be subject to taxes. So if it's a qualified annuity, that withdrawal is going to be fully taxable. If it's a non-qualified annuity, so just a after-tax annuity, the first thing that comes out is the earnings. So you pay ordinary income taxes, like at your marginal tax bracket, on that until you get down to your contributions and all the earnings are withdrawn.
Oh, good point.
Then you get your tax, after-tax withdrawals, which you don't pay taxes on. Right, they're your original contributions. So that's important. The flip side is true. It doesn't work that way if you annuitize, which we'll get to in a minute, which is where you initiate the income feature. But there's another interesting option available to you for, getting out of the annuity if you don't like it. And that's you can do what's called a 1035 exchange into another annuity product.
1035 references the code, the Internal Revenue Code. So that's why it's called a 1035.
Yeah. Also why a 401k is called a 401k. They didn't just like that combination of numbers and letters. It's good Section point. 401k of the Revenue Code. Anyway, a little bit of nerdy trivia there for you.
Yep.
So the 1035 exchange is where you take the annuity.
It's a like-kind transfer is what
right.
The wording that they use.
Right. So you can take that and you can actually basically roll that into another annuity, and it's not considered a withdrawal that would be taxable.
So you get to continue to defer the taxes.
Right.
Now be careful. Don't do a 1035 exchange into a contract that generates a new commission, that generates a new surrender period. All you're doing is making friends with the insurance agent when you do that. You're not doing yourself any favors.
Right. It's also important not to take possession of the money yourself. It's got to go directly from annuity A to annuity B. You can't write a check to yourself and then go out and get the new annuity. That would be totally counterproductive. Another important thing to consider, if you do one of these exchanges, you may still be subject to the surrender period and the surrender charge on the first annuity. So, one thing to consider, it may be staying within the same company and having them waive the surrender charge. That is an available option since it's within the same company. But if you go from a Mass Mutual annuity to a Nationwide annuity, that may not be the case.
And we're just using those names hypothetically. We're not speaking about Nationwide or Mass Mutual specifically. So
another way to avoid the surrender charge and to, avoid any kind of penalty is just to annuitize the contract, right? Now, you're not getting out of the annuity in this case. You're actually using the income feature, and you're starting up the monthly or quarterly income. Now, you're locking in permanently in that situation, right? If you annuitize, that's the end of it. You've got this income.
The devil's in the details too. The terms under which you annuitize and the way that they calculate the benefit payment is critical. Also, make sure that if you have a living spouse, that you consider whether or not to provide a survivor benefit for that spouse. And is it important to you to have a period certain in which if you were to die shortly after annuitizing, that at least for a period of time your beneficiary would receive some value for it?
Right. I also would want to touch on the tax piece of this too, because like I said before, withdrawals, you're taxed on earnings first, then you get through all the earnings, and then you have your return of contributions, which are not taxed. When you annuitize on a qualified annuity, so one that's in an IRA or a retirement plan, your whole payment is going to be fully taxable. In a non-qualified annuity, they basically prorate it, right? So part of the payment is considered the earnings, which are fully taxable. Part of it is considered return of your contribution, which is not. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as well when you're considering the annuitize option.
We're going to run out of time here in a second, so we should probably just say this, and that is there are as many annuity types out there as there probably are insects in the world. I mean, there are just tons of them. Your situation is different than your neighbors or your friends or your family members, and each annuity has different features. So really what you need is, if you're having some second thoughts about that annuity that you bought, you need to get impartial advice. And I'm not sure that going to the agent who sold it to you is the best way to do it. You want to make sure that you understand where conflicts of interest lie. So, that pretty much wraps it up for today. But these annuities can be very powerful tools. They can be problematic as well. So definitely get good advice before you buy one. And if you already bought one you don't like, get good advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment, especially if you have a question. We'll get back to you or maybe make an episode on it. Share with your friends and family, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.